Yeah.
Where are you located?
I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia, and Charlottesville is very much like a triangle, and Virginia is like a triangle, and Charlottesville is pretty much in the center,
Yeah.
and then Roanoke is 2 hours south of here, pretty much southwest.
To the left corner of the triangle.
Yes, right. Yeah, that way. The geography is kind of interesting, though. Virginia, the land area of the state of Virginia, one of the 50 states, is 4 times the size of the Netherlands. And we have half the number of people.
Wow.
Wow.
So, and I think about 1/25 the number of bicycles. You have to have a lot of courage to ride a bicycle in this country. Yeah. Well, I don't know if who else. Let's see who else is on. Iris, I see you now. Good, and so I don't know if others are on, but let's take a minute to introduce ourselves. It's obvious I'm Grant Tate. My company is Bridge Business Transformations, a small organization. Right now it's just me, and I've got 2 partners, but they don't operate very much. So Terry, tell us about you.
I'm Terry Keffer, and my business name is Keffer Business Services. I have worked with Grant. I worked as a vice president for a construction company for 23 years and recently went into the consulting business. I have worked with Grant for about 10 years. Yeah. So I'm glad to be with you today.
Yeah. So Francesca.
Yes, I'm Francesca Caprioli. I'm study manager at Lighthouse Instrument. I joined Lighthouse, let's say, recently. This means August last year. So almost 1 year now that I work with the team. And yeah, that's it about me.
Good. All right, good. Kevin.
I'm Kevin Donkers. I live about a little bit south of Amsterdam. Work for Lighthouse Instruments for now almost a year and 5 months. So started January last year. And I'm a service support engineer, so I travel to customers and help them with installations and and troubleshooting if they have any problems.
And so where are you from originally, Kevin?
I am Dutch.
Yeah, and what part?
I'm originally from the
north. I know it's small, but you
north. I'm part of the northwest. So part of the northwest.
Which is
Den Helder. That's where I originally from.
Helder, yeah. So my wife is up from the Groningen area. So a little bit familiar with that. Yeah. Ilse.
Okay, so I'm Ilse Optenkelder. I'm also Dutch. I'm an analyst, so I mainly do lab work. I've worked here for 1.5 years, I think. In November will be 2 years.
Oh, good.
So,
So, Ilse, where were you born?
I was born in Hoorn, which is about an hour north of Amsterdam.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Good. Kelsey.
Hi, I'm Kelsey. I'm from Sydney, Australia, and I'm in the same role as Kevin as a service and support engineer, and I've been with Lighthouse for 9 months. Yeah.
So how in the world did you? Well, you probably rode a plane, but what brought you to the Netherlands?
I took a very roundabout trip. I visited several countries on my way over, so came by plane, train, bus, ferry, the whole lot. I wanted to live in Europe for a couple of years because there's just so much to see, and I didn't want to do a short trip. And if I had to do a long trip, then I should make it worthwhile and make a huge trip of it if I was going to leave my job back in Australia anyway. So I did that 6 years ago and still haven't left.
That's great. Good, good. Okay. Iris. See.
Yes, I'm Iris Koning. I'm Dutch originally. Well, I'm in a similar position as Ilse is as an analyst for a year now at Lighthouse. I also come from the same region as Ilse, so Horen and little villages around there.
Good. Well, we've my wife Uncaline and I have been back in the States now since '97. So, but I still miss Europe. I was in Netherlands for almost 5 years, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Still miss it. And as you read in the newspapers, we're going through a very difficult time here in the United States. So it's something we're all watching carefully and very concerned about. And we're having demonstrations right here in our own little city, and people have a lot to be concerned about. And it's a difficult time, but we're working our way through it. Okay, I wanted to tell you that we are also recording because other people wanted to be able to see this, and just so you should all be aware of that. A few ground rules. One is please speak up. I have some slides to talk about, but this session is for you, and just want to make it as beneficial as we possibly can to help you understand what the assessment is saying, and also anything else that you'd like to talk about. We're going to aim for an hour and a half, but if you would like to talk to me individually, we can arrange that and go into more detail if you like on your own specific assessment and anything that you might want to talk about there. Just to give you a little ground rules on how we do these. Typically, when we're running the assessments for an organization, the person gets a copy of the results, and so does the manager. And so the manager is able to see the report, and lots of times if the manager has never seen the report, has never worked through these assessments before, then one of us, Terry or me, would explain what it means. When we have an interview, the ground rules change a bit because what we generally say is that conversation is between, if I'm doing the interview, between me and that person, and anything that we say together in that session is confidential. And then any report that I give to the manager or what the other person says, then that is something we agree on. In other words, we don't tell secrets. So, it's Terry and I were talking about our cats. If I say if somebody says in the session, I kicked my cat, well, I'm not going to go tell the manager, that, Kevin kicks his cat or something, Point being that sometimes when you're working with people and talking about their jobs or what's going on in their life, that lots of times it can be confidential and things that you don't want to necessarily share. We've done over 1,000 of these individually with a wide variety of people, from students to whatever. We've done groups in India, UK, and of course Netherlands and other places. And here in this country, the assessments are certified as being non-discriminatory, which is important here. In other words, the questions aren't oriented so that people in a particular race would have an advantage over others. So it is a qualified device for using as part of the hiring process. And that's important to us. And as we go through and we talk about what some of the assessments mean, you might ask the question, do we see a difference between men and women statistics, or, you know, or different kinds of jobs and those kinds of things? So those are legitimate questions. When we're using this as hiring, or are we using it as, you know, for instance, what are we looking for as a person in a particular job? It's one factor. It's not the whole factor. So usually, you know, if a manager is using this as part of the hiring routine, and they have three people, and we're looking at assessments, then we try to ask the question, what's required in this job? But the assessment turns out to be one factor. It's not. We generally don't reject people, for instance, on the basis of this particular tool. It's only one factor: interviews and a variety of other things. Like manner, when we're using it as a foundation for job counseling or trying to help people grow in their career, it's a foundation for having that conversation. So there is no right or wrong in these assessments. In other words, sometimes you can have invalid assessments, and I'll talk about that when we get into the details. But we're not looking for certain scores. In other words, it's not like I'm trying to get a higher grade. The graphs give us some idea of what are the most important factors, but it's not like there's, I'm trying to shoot for the highest score. That's not the case. But there are profiles that fit a particular job better than others. And so we can talk about that as we go along. So feel free to ask questions as we go, and happy to engage in anything that you want to talk about. So let me share the screen now, and we'll start going through so can you see that? Okay, everybody's is now muted, so I think you said
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So here's a person, a fictitious person, and so how do we use the assessments to find out what this person is like? And so what as we sort of talked about at the beginning, at the end, I'd like for you to be able to interpret your own assessment report, and then also know something about how do I apply it? This is an interesting result, but so what? We hope to answer that question. As I said, we can schedule an individual discussion, and unless you want to bring it up, we're not going to discuss your specific results. I do, however, have a team chart which plots all the different disc profiles, and you can get an idea of what your whole team looks like on that from that. We're obviously talking in American English. Both of us are from down in the southern part of the country. If there's something you don't understand, either because we say something odd or because of the speed or the language or something, please slow down. Tell us to slow down or repeat or whatever. It's okay. And several of you took the assessments in Dutch. And so in a case like that, when I get a copy of the report, it's in English. If it comes across in Dutch, I take it to my wife and say, please show me what this means. And the last comment on this chart is don't hide, which is, as speak up. Okay, so what are we trying to do? You may or may not have seen this, but it's called the Johari window. And so there are things that we know about ourselves And those things we're quite open about. These are things that are known to other people. So they might know that, you know that Terry and I own a cat, and we know that. Or you might know that I got a degree in some place, and those kinds of things. Or there are characteristics that I know about myself and you know about me. And then there are things that I don't know about myself. These might be things that others observe, and those could be personality characteristics or attitudes or things that others observe, and maybe nobody ever tells us those things, or if they do, we don't believe them. And so those we call blind spots, and all of us have them. And then there are things that we know about ourselves, our deep secrets that we may or may not want to reveal. It could be something that's historic. We don't care if people know about it, but we just haven't let it be known. Or there may be things that specifically we don't want to make public to other people. And then there's the area where there are things that we don't know and others don't know either. And so can you think of an example of that? Everybody's being really quiet. The example I often use, and we're not sitting in a room, but if we were sitting in this room together, is suppose we had an earthquake. And since we don't experience many earthquakes here, where in Virginia, where we are, I'm not sure how I might react to that. And likewise, you don't have any idea how I might react to that. So this would be an event or something that comes up that we don't know how a person might interact to a particular situation. So those are unknown. So what are we trying to do with these assessments? Well, we're trying to increase this area right here in particular, and then perhaps some of these. But in other words, the more we can understand about ourselves, the more effective we can be in dealing with life and dealing with other people. And so it's an opportunity for us to do some self-reflection. And the people who do these assessments, this Intermetrics company that you may have seen on the report itself, they did an extensive study years ago and said there are two elements that really are important for a person's success. It said one is self-knowledge, knowing about yourself, and the other one is authenticity. And they define authenticity as being in a job situation that matches your skills and interest, and get a proper match. And the assessments help us do that, so that it does give us some idea about our strengths, and in some cases, some of our we don't call them weaknesses, we call them vulnerabilities. And the more we can understand about ourselves and how we like to work, it gives us a better chance of selecting the right job. So showed you this picture of the young woman on the front page. Let's take a look at her assessment. And usually when we talk about these, the report goes from the DISC report to the values to the attribute index, all that big, all those 70 pages. And the reason we talk about them in the order is that it's really moving from a simpler test to a more complex test. So that test, that the attribute index at the end, is really the most complicated one to explain, and the report itself doesn't really explain it in a lot of depth, but I'll try to help you work your way through that. So in this test,
Grant, are they looking at their own report now? Should they be looking at page 4?
Oh, that's a good question, Terry. Do you have if you have your reports with you, it will help to look at it. This is page 4.
And while they're doing that, I think too, and I know we're not going to talk about individual results here, but having taken a disc and having taken all of these and having taken several iterations of the disc, it's really interesting on a team to once, ultimately somebody on the team is going to refer to themselves as, for instance, a high I, and Grant will talk about that. And it's interesting to see other members of the team, how they kind of shake out too as far as their scores. So when you'll begin to, once you become familiar with the profiles, you will be able to recognize certain characteristics in your teammates as well, and you'll be able to say, oh, that's why so-and-so responds this way, because they are a high C, for instance, or something like that. So
yeah, right.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's thanks, Terry. That's something we'll talk about as we go along here. But so the 4 factors are decisiveness, interaction, stability, and caution. And a way to look at this is that the height of the bar sort of speaks to how much emphasis you put on that characteristics and how quick you are to engage that characteristic. So this person we're looking at here is a 99D, and very tends to be very decisive, very quick to decide. And so when something comes up where that the person where a decision is needed, they're going to be like, wow, we need to move ahead. I is interaction. It's not quite introvert, extrovert, but it is how the person likes to interact with people. This is not empathy. That's shown on the third chart, third graph. But a person who high I generally likes to be out working with people. A person who's high I would, for instance, be having a lot of trouble with what we're going through now, which is isolation, working alone in our offices and our houses and that sort of thing. The high I person wants to be out, interacting with people. Stability is how much the person likes change. The high stability, if you're way up at 99, generally a person like that doesn't like change much, like things nice and steady. And a person who's really low on that factor might like change for change's sake. I'm tired of this, let's just change it. And then caution, high C is pretty much what it says. To a person who is high in caution is going to be usually lower in decisiveness also, and high in caution. That's a person who likes details. When I have to make a decision, I want to make sure it's right. So given these 4 factors and looking at this person, is this person a scientist?
I don't think so. Usually scientists are more in the details.
Yes, well, yeah. And so people who go into science usually they're in science because they like the details. They want to learn, they want to understand how things work. And so a typical scientist would be shaped like this. So low D and high C. So let's put this young woman in a room with a typical scientist, and we have a decision to make. So we need to decide if we're going to buy this piece of equipment. So how does that decision process work out?
Some conflict.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes. Yeah.
I think this person will want to make a very quick decision within a very short period of time, and the scientist will want to discuss and ask a lot of questions and get clarification on all the possible certainties and uncertainties and risk factors, and before making an informed decision, which will frustrate the decisive person because that's very time consuming and irrelevant for them.
Yeah. Yeah, they're right. And so that's
But
exactly right. We call that channel conflict, which is two different styles trying to make the decision. Now, from an overall standpoint, would you get better quality and timely decisions with the two of those people working together or one of the people working separately? Now, my answer for that is you get better decisions if they can work together. if the high D is patient enough to slow down and consider the details, and if the cautious person is willing to move ahead. And so usually in a situation like that where we have a group, what helps is we have a decision to make by Friday whether to buy this piece of equipment. Let's write down the process. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here are the things we're going to consider and the things we're going to go through in making this decision. That tends to slow down the high D person and tends to speed up the detail person. Okay, now what kind of job does this person fit? You've already told me this is not a scientist, so probably not going to put this person on a workbench.
An entrepreneur or CEO, because they're both decisive but also have high interaction.
Yeah. So, we're the situation we're going through in the United States now with policemen. Policemen typically fit a profile like this because they are, this is only one piece of it. This is decisiveness. Somebody who is a military leader, you probably want to have a profile like this because if the enemy is shooting for you, you need to make quick decisions. So having that sort of thing. But so this would be more like a profile of a leader or and perhaps a policeman or a manager, perhaps. Okay, let's then learn a bit more about this person. So this is the values. Let me back up here just a second on this one. The red bars are the red, yellow, green, and blue bars are the natural style. This is how the person would like to behave and how to use these factors if they had complete freedom. The gray bars are how the person is experiencing her life. And so if we look at this says she's able to make decisions pretty much in the speed she prefers. But look at this. She would prefer to be able to interact with people at this level, but what she's experiencing is this. So if you're talking to this person, say, well, what's going on? You don't have as much interaction as you like. Maybe you should get out more. No, I'm confined to my office. And the same with stability. I'd prefer this kind of stability, but she's experiencing this. And what does this mean? Our trigger is if it's more than 30-point difference between any one of these, then that's a potential source of stress. And if you have that on your in any of your measurements, then the question you need to ask yourself is, why am I experiencing this difference? And does it really mean anything to me in terms of my psychological feeling? Stability, for instance, 63 to 17. This person is not feeling as stable as she would like. And we typically see this with people who are changing jobs. So they're leaving one job, going to another brand new situation, or people that are, moving from one side of the world to the other. So, and so changes can be the cause of that. But if the person is, if we're seeing these kind of variations, you do have to ask the question, are you in the right job? If this is a temporary situation, you can explain, okay, that's easy enough. But if I'm constantly feeling this difference, then maybe I should be doing something different. Okay, so now looking at the values index, what we typically think about in this one is to look at what drives the person. And that's usually there are 1 to 3 of these factors that are high, like this person. And so the measurements are, so individualistic. The person has a strong sense of themselves. And, I feel confident about myself and I'm trying to move ahead. Political is power in a group. Person high in political is typically going to come on strong in a meeting or a group setting. Theoretical. Theoretical is basically thirst for knowledge. People high in theoretical like to learn and they're constantly learning. The gray bars, this is the norm of everybody who's taken the test. That's hundreds of thousands of people over 47 countries. This is one standard deviation. So we look at this person, they are like over 2 standard deviations higher than norm on individualistic. Also 2 standard deviations on political and 2 on theoretical. Aesthetic is just what it says, form and beauty. People high in aesthetic often are artists or like art or straight desks. Economic, pretty much what it says, but it's not just money. It's also people high in the economic like to have a sense of concrete accomplishments. Altruistic is helping other people, and regulatory sticking to the rules. Interesting conversation I had yesterday with someone is that when we're working with scientists, do we typically see scientists being high in regulatory? What would you think?
Well, if you want to perform a proper experiment, you need to establish what the protocol is of that experiment. So you're used to writing everything down and knowing what you have to do. So I think it's mainly based on that, because otherwise you can't trust what you do.
Yes. Well, you explained
on the
that.
other hand, on the other hand, they also do need to be innovative and think of new ways to approach a problem.
Yeah.
So then you don't really have the rules and strictness and structure.
Well, yeah, then that you both have brought up exactly the debate we had yesterday, which is we're saying, well, yeah, they need to stick to the rules and follow the process, but what about the innovation? The answer to that is, having tested a lot of scientists, in general, they are not high on regulatory in the ones I've tested. So it's been interesting to me. Okay, looking at this person's profile, again, is this a profile for a scientist? And so the scientists are typically high on theoretical. And indeed, when we're hiring people for a scientific group, the people who are doing the hiring look for this factor because it's really important. One organization I work with here in Charlottesville, every single person of the 30 people is above 80% on that measurement. They're all scientists. They're all always studying. Then the rest vary. There's an interesting relationship between individualistic and altruistic. So a person who's really high in individualistic and really low in altruistic cares more about themselves than other people. A person who's low in individualistic and high in altruistic might be working for a nonprofit trying to help people that need help. Then you would think that CEOs tend to be high on economic, and strangely enough, not necessarily the case. If you look at Jim and Derek, they're both low on economic. It may not seem that way to you, but that's the way they came out. Okay, so let's then think about this. This is for the same person we talked about before. What do we know about this person so far? High D and I is going to be strong in this. Want to be quick decisions and pretty come across pretty strongly on that score. High individualistic and strong in a meeting. So whoa, this person is going to come on strong. So if you're going to disagree with this person in a meeting, then you better be ready for a fight. Now, the person may be full of tact. I'm not saying that they're going to be tactless necessarily, but if I go back to this little chart that's in your report about D's and so forth, a 99 D would put person up in the demanding or driving category. The I indicator would probably be enthusiastic or sociable. They would be down low, relatively outgoing, restless perhaps, and then careless or defiant on the caution. So those are some of the words that can help define these characteristics. So but this chart that also is an indication for your manager or yourself to say, what are the things that are really important to me in my job? What am I looking for that's going to help me be motivated? In old-fashioned management training, we used to teach managers it's your job to motivate your people. And now we generally say it's your job to figure out what motivates the individuals in your group and then try to help them find those things in their job. And so if I'm, when I look at this and I'm trying to fit a person to a job, I'm trying to say, what is it about the job that's really going to attract this person? Does this person fit here? So if you are, if you're looking for a salesperson, then you can look at for a certain profile. If I'm looking for scientists, I want them to be high in theoretical, to be constantly looking for learning. And if I'm looking for a leader, I probably want them high in political. Now, at this point, you might be saying, okay, are these permanent? Can I change them? Now, let me go back to DISC for a minute. It turns out that the colored bars are reasonably stable. So if I test you in 6 months, probably find pretty generally the same profile. Yeah, it'll vary a bit just because of the way you answer the questions, but you're not going to radically change the way this graph looks. But the gray bar depends on circumstances. if a person comes in and is looking for a job and is going through job interviews, then they can generally see that, well, this gray bar is down here. 6 months later, after they have gotten in the job and we test them, you see different gray profile usually. Or if there's something going on in your life, your personal life, it can affect the gray parts of this chart. And so going back to then the values index, do these change? In this chart, slowly. Again, only statistical variation. But can we coach to get this to change? What we found out in working with managers in scientific organizations, that people who are low in political, that is power in a group or working with a group, through coaching over a period of time, we see this tend to grow. We may find that altruistic tends to grow when they become more concerned about their people. So yes, it can change over time. And as the old joke says, how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer to that is 1 if the bulb wants to change. So if a person really wants to learn more about people, to learn to be change their behaviors and approach, yes, it can be done, but it takes time. Okay, most complicated part of the test. This is a third test. We're now over in page 54 or something like that. Yeah. This is 4, 5, 6, and 7. I think it's page 7 in your profile. First of all, if you look in the upper right-hand corner of that graph, you see 2 numbers. This has 0.93 and 0.75. You can think of this as the confidence we have in these measurements. Now, this is a validity score. The 9.3 refers to the external measurements, and the 0.75 refers to the internals. That says we have more confidence in these than we have in these. And so that's important when you're looking at this. Now, these charts, the blue bars, there were two exercises you had to do where you had to stack different things, like poisoning the water supply was, those sort of questions. And when you were stacking those, then the mathematics of this, a mathematical system called axiology, gives us these kind of results. And so empathy is basically the person's level of sensitivity to other people. So how quick can I sense other people? And the height of the bar then is a measure of that sensitivity. So someone who's way up here.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, of course.
Someone high in empathy, would that person also be high on as an altruist, or is that not necessarily related?
Not necessarily related, but often is the case. Yes, they're not tied together, but it's part of that measurement. Yes. Now, one of the things as a result of when we do a group, I can download a spreadsheet that has like 100 columns. It has all these numbers in it, and we can do those correlations. I have not studied that particular one, but it is possible for us to draw correlation curves between those two factors. If you take this group in particular, Yeah. So, but a very interesting question, and those are the questions we ask as we go along, particularly if we're interviewing someone. Yeah. These tend to be very stable, and the internals can change a lot depending on circumstances. A high-level executive, a woman I was working with one time, said to me when we were looking at this, "I'm not surprised that I have low scores. My son, his wife, 2 children, and 3 dogs just moved in with us." So that is a factor that can affect the way she's seeing how she's feeling. So empathy is just what Ilse was talking about, is how do you feel about other people? And the height of the bar says the level of sensitivity. So someone who's a 9 is going to be quicker to sense other people than somebody who's a 4. Practical thinking is the propensity to just get things done. So, and things are moving fast, and somebody who high in practical thinking is going to say, okay, I've got a problem. How do I fix this? Then systems judgment is the bigger picture. How does it all fit together? How does this company work? What are the complex elements of this problem we're working on? And so the relative height of the bars is important here. So if you look at this, and when things are moving rapidly, the first thing this person is going to be thinking about is, how do I solve this problem? And the second thing would be, oh, well, maybe I should talk about the other, think about the people as well. By contrast, somebody who's high in empathy and low on these would be, when things are moving fast, is they, oh my goodness, my best friend's going to be affected by this. And so this relative height is important. Someone who is in these categories up here, particularly if all 3 are there, and lots of times we see people that are pretty equal in all 3. And the words will say, if the person is equal in all 3, and particularly if they're high, you'd better keep this person busy, because if not, they're going to be bored. And they are generally looking for more things to work on. And on the bottom, and looking at the numbers, you see a minus, plus, and plus. It's a really complicated mathematical formula for how those are calculated, but basically it says the 8-point plus or minus is a level of optimism or pessimism, which is to say, in empathy, for instance, it's a minus. It says that this person has a pretty quick capability of sensing other people, but she tends to be a little suspicious of the person at the beginning. Not so quick to trust a person. Likewise, on practical thinking, though, with a plus, I'm pretty confident I can get this done. But the net effect of this is that the person would tend to emphasize these even more than empathy. So now, over on self-esteem and self-belief is, and generally we see lower scores on the internal than we do on the external. So self-esteem is just what it says. How much do I believe in myself? What's my role compared to other people? And where am I headed? So we would say with this young woman, you know, not in any critical situation of self-esteem and role awareness, but she's got some questions about where am I really headed in life or in my job. So what's the result if we see scores in here, down in the low area? What does it tell us?
This is going back to your Johari window that you were talking about at the beginning, where it's what you don't know of yourself that potentially others see of you.
Could be, yes, right. Lots of times those low scores are associated with a low number here, which means that they may have had trouble with the test. So if this number is below 0.7, for instance, sometimes we say maybe this person should take the test over because they had trouble with it. But generally, I've found it's best to have the conversation first, because if the person is going through a situation where they have some questions about themselves, then it's good to know that and see what can be done to help themselves. And there are some things in coaching that you can directly start to help people work with their own self-belief and self-esteem, for instance. And if any of you would ever like to discuss that, I'm happy to discuss it with you. So the other thing, of course, is what's going on in life. It could be a temporary situation, or it could be a permanent situation that's causing low scores here. These tend to be relatively slow, but now let's back up and ask ourselves, given these 3 tests, the report does not tell us how they fit together or cross-interpret, but what do we know about this young woman? Very decisive, like high interaction, likes to work with people, confident and strong individualistic, strong political and high theoretical, very practical thinking, high systems judgment, going to be concentrating on solving problems, okay on self-esteem and role awareness, but generally, what's the person's working style?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
This one in the self-direction example, it's a low number at 4.3, but it does have a positive sign. Would this be indicative that they're on a growth upwards, as in that they have the positive thoughts towards self-direction, but they're not there yet, maybe because they are in a new job? Or it seems to be not synonymous with each other by having a low number, but a plus signal there. I'm just curious.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Exactly right. That says, I don't know where I'm headed, but I'm confident I'm going to find out one day. Yeah, exactly. On the other hand, I've got some questions on the other 2 minus. There's a particular case where there are 3 minuses. And if that's the case, the person may have a relatively pessimistic and dark view of themselves. And that's a signal that we need to really have some conversations that maybe the person needs some help. Now, going back to what I said at the beginning of this, you can see that this part of the test becomes very personal. And therefore, when we do group work, sometimes we will, ask people if they mind sharing the other parts of the test. And if they say yes, we can talk about all the numbers, but we do not talk about the internal part of the test. And so then you can raise the question, suppose a person has relatively low scores on this one, and if we have a low number here, then we may ask, if that happens to be one of you, I haven't remembered all the scores, but if you have a low number here and you'd like to take the test over, that's fine. I'd be happy to have you do that. If the manager sees this and the scores are low, what's the reaction? What we say is, we may say, look, the person might need some coaching, or here's some things you can do to help the person feel more confident about their job. So there are some specific things you can suggest there. If we're talking individually, then we sometimes dig into the detail, and we can work out some ways that actually can help the person move ahead. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna stop with that and ask. Obviously we're waded into a little sensitive area here, so, but feel free to ask questions. Okay, so now I'm going to raise the question about, given all this, and I have this big fat 70-page report, what in the world can I do with it? Where do I go in this report that's going to help me figure out what do I do next? So the answer for that starts on page 15. And so when I go through the report with a person, what I'm looking for is, do the other two tests add validity to what I'm reading on the page 15 through 22? Because 15 through 22 are the most practical elements of the test from the standpoint of giving you suggestions of what to work on. And so if you get to page 15, you see something called Natural Style Pattern Overview. There's also one on adaptive, but the one that's most helpful is to look at the comments relative to what the test is saying about your strengths and how you like to operate. So given this person with this profile, what I might be saying to this person is, hey, be careful. You can run over people. Don't come on too strong. Listen, tune your listening. Those kind of things. Those are coaching elements that I would be saying to this person. Manage your impatience, because people are not going to be as have your profile. Also, if this person is working with scientists, for instance, most of your staff is going to be different. Stop and listen. They have a lot to say. So when the profile is that strong in one direction, you can give the person specific things that can help. But so if you look at this very strong verbal and persuasive skills, good news. But if the person uses it too much or too strongly, then it can be a problem. So if the person goes down each of these, and you say, okay, these are elements that are strong points, that's helpful. And here are the strength-based insights. Initiates new ideas and promotes them by energizing others. Demands high performance of self and others on the team. So if this person is looking at this and say, oh, that's good news, but can you be too demanding? Well, yeah, that's the other side of it. So these are all strengths, but every strength needs to be moderated. Then ideas for being more effective. Here's some specific things that to watch out for, that I'm looking for ways that I can work, that I can be more effective. And then here are some things that I need to work on for continual improvement. You may tend to be a selective listener. That says, okay, I need to spend more time just slowing down and hearing what other people have to offer. Be sensitive to their needs. I can be intimidating to others due to my aggressiveness and dominance. So these are elements that the person needs to be careful of. And so on these pages, there's some specific things that you can look at that can be helpful for your everyday work and behaviors. Okay. So suppose I read, say, and that says, lack some follow through with details elusive, and you say, that never happens to me. Then my response to that usually is, well, disprove it. if you can. Show me some examples where that you have not ever done that. Or can you think of some examples? So you can take each one of these and spend some time and say, is this something I need to be concerned about? What are the things I need to be most concerned about? What can help me in my relationship with my teammates and be a more effective person? Questions?
Graham, I think that it's really important, and you've really hit on it. But you know, some of these things we would say a person is the way they're wired.
Mm-hmm.
So when we start talking about change, it's some things are very difficult to change, but the awareness piece is so important that I may be wired this way, but I need to understand that I'm wired this way.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm wired this way, here are my typical responses.
Mm-hmm.
And they can be strengths, but taken to excess, they can create, you know, some difficulties at times. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important for folks to understand that, you know, this gives great insight. There are no right or wrong answers, even though there may be certain profiles that are better fits for certain jobs. But if you know thyself, if you're really sincere and authentic when you complete these profiles, you can get a lot of insight into yourself, and then you can adapt
Mm-hmm.
to situations as you need to adapt to them. And I think it's really important to understand that it's not about saying, boy, I wish I were a higher D, or I wish I were a lower D, or that's what I am. And so how do I work with that? And how do I understand when I need to adapt to be, if I'm a lower D, and I need to be more decisive using some of the strategies that you have already outlined, how can I adapt to the environment in which I am?
Right. Yeah, exactly right. And also that has a lot to do with the kind of person that you may work with, you may want to work with. You know, what do you tend to find is that if you're working with somebody who has your style, it's like you're, you know, two airplanes flying wing to wing. It's easy to communicate with somebody like that. And so some people tend to want to hire people just like themselves or work with people just like themselves. It's easy. There's no tension. But our best teams are when you choose somebody that's has a different profile.
Right. Then you have, if everyone thinks the same way and has similar profiles, then you have group blind spots.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. And so let's just sort of play that out for a minute. Here are a couple of people talking. Now we can address this decision, but you know, since you're generally in the area of sales and marketing, but let's say, for instance, this is the person we're talking about. Here's her profile. This is the one directly from the screens you've been seeing, and she's trying to sell this person on a new machine. And here's this person's profile. Now, she's never seen this, of course, because we haven't tested this person. So how can I find out how the person likes, what the person's profile might be? And so if I'm selling to the chief scientist of a pharmaceutical company who has to choose the machine, what is that person's profile likely to be? Well, more like this, like the one that we're seeing here, relatively low decisive, but high stability and caution. You know, show me the details. And she's thinking, why can't this guy make a decision? Why does he need more details? Why does he keep asking me those questions? And so it's important to sense what kind of person you're dealing with. So if when we talk about sales, the first step of sales is making a favorable impression. And so if this person goes in the room and comes on too strong to start with, then this person might be turned off by that whole idea. And so try to observe and try to understand how the person makes decision. So what are they? Now let's. I wish I'd chosen one that didn't have a computer in front of it. Let's sort of imagine that the computer's not there. She's just trying to make a sales pitch. So what do we know about this guy? He's sitting there with a pad and a pencil. He's ready to take notes about what she's telling him. Yeah, maybe he likes details. He's pleasant. He smiles. He's probably got a lot of experience, a lot more than she has probably. He's a scientist, so he's probably, but at the same time, he's risen to a relatively high level. And so that being able to understand the person we're working with and adapting our style to what the person likes to, how the person likes to operate would be important. And what we say in sales is, you're not trying to sell something. You're trying to help the person buy. And so what she should be thinking about, what's this person's decision process to go through and buy something? He probably likes a lot of detail. He wants to make sure it's right. We've got $1 million piece of equipment he's considering. That's a big pile of money, even in this rich company he's working for. How's he going to decide? So I've got to help him work through that process. And to work through that process, I really have to understand how he decides and what the company's sales process looks like. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. And so now let's explore a little deeper. First of all, I want to show you this last page. This is the last page of your report. The reason this last test is called the attribute index, these are all the attributes it measures. So what does this list mean? This is all the factors that are measured in this test. Each one of those things you were stacking up represented several of these. And the way to look at this list is that each one of these is how you value that item. So this person valued theoretical problem solving and integrative ability highest on the list. Doesn't mean that those are the things that are actually implemented. That's not measuring implementation. It's measuring the person's propensity to put that at the top. But if you look at this and you look at what this person's strengths are, integrative ability, theoretical problem solving, situation analysis, concrete organization, practical thinking, and so forth. So you say, whoa, this person is probably a really good problem solver. So should I enlarge this so you can see it better, or can you make it out?
I've noticed that you've put boxes around them. Is that just to give an idea, or you would say that the top 10 or anything above a 7.9, or how did you assign?
Yeah, that's in a case like this, I usually look down and say, all right, and I could go to all the way down this and say these are your strong points. And lots of times I actually do an imaginary bracket and say, in that category, these are your strong points. What I don't recommend is to take any particular item and obsess about it, whether it's high or low. That doesn't help. There's a couple of exceptions to that. Over on this down here, these are the points that are lowest. And if you look at, you see self a lot here. What's that telling about this person? I call these vulnerabilities, but a lot of cases you find self in these lower brackets. Self-discipline, let's see, I've been asking myself the question about scientists, after having worked with a lot of you. Are scientists less prone to be self-aware than people in other fields? When I look at the group of scientists in the different companies, and I look at that detailed spreadsheet, generally the self-awareness measurements are relatively low by comparison. And if that generally turns out to be the case, then you have to say, well, why is that? Yeah. And why is it relevant? Well, it's relevant when you're working in a group, and it's also relevant because some scientists do become leaders. And if you believe that your own characteristics, self-characteristic, understanding yourself is important, then you have to say, well, those are things I need to work on. Do I need better antennas for myself? So when I look at this particular person, then if I want to focus on how to get through to this person, and as a person who does some coaching, I have to ask, is this person coachable? Can I get through to her? I know she comes on strong. She's got a strong sense of purpose and whatever, and quick decision maker, but can I say, whoa, slow down? Or do I have to hit the person with a brick to get their attention? It doesn't completely answer that question, but you do see self-improvement at a 6.9. That's one factor. It's not, but it does give you some encouragement about or coaching to look here. But you look at vulnerabilities here, then we already know self-direction was a problem, an issue, but then these are the things you have to be comfortable. Now, tell you something about executives. In general, executives aren't taking care of themselves. And they're focused on the business, they're focused on other people, and generally when I'm working with executives, the last question I ask before leaving the office is, are you taking care of yourself? And in many cases, the answer to that is no. Not getting enough rest, not getting enough exercise, maybe not taking care of their weight. But no matter what job you're in, that balance is critically important. Okay, again, stop and see about questions. Iris, I see you. I see you. Yeah, go ahead.
I got a question about the numbers itself. Does it really say anything about the level, or is it more the balance between them? Because I think from yours, it's the lowest is 4 and the highest is 9, which is quite a big.
Yeah, it's really that the answers both are right, which means that these are the things that would be particular strengths that the person is going to be optimizing on, and these are the things that the person is going to pay little attention to. So if you think about the relative antenna, the person has a relatively low sensitivity to these elements.
And the conclusion would be the same if all of these in the last box would, for example, be around 6?
Then I would be less concerned.
Okay.
And so if, basically if the tilt of the assessment is more equal, then you find less differentials in those things.
Yeah.
And so in some cases, let's take a person who's 999 on the scores and very high on all things. That's a rare case, but all these numbers would tend to be the same. And so the differential does count. That does mean that those items that are in my box up here are going to be emphasized by the person, and these are going to be the things that are not thought of very much. And so in coaching that person, you can help them become more aware that they need to slow down, that they need to take care of themselves, that they need to focus on self-control. One of the things interesting, this item called self-control, that this person is 5.2, it is low in the world. Everybody's low on that factor, which is sort of frightening to think about. But yeah. Okay. Now, before I want to circle back to some ways you can develop your plan, but here's a chart that shows you the Amsterdam team.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you slightly enlarge the screen for me?
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Itself.
Let's see. How's that? Is that getting better?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So what this means is this is D, I, S, and C. If a person was 100% on the D scale and 0 on the rest, that person would fit in this corner. Or same with I. So someone who's high here is high in both D and I. So it turns out everybody from New Zealand fits into this category.
Australia, yeah.
Australia, yeah, right.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And so generally we have a cluster of everybody in the organization, and this includes your senior staff as well. Here's Derek, you have Marlene, and so forth. And so let's see, Francesco, where are you? There you are. Francesco's a 46. And if you look in the detail at this, you see the red is the DISC score, and this gives you even a comparison of the relative height of those 4 items. So what can we do with this? And how would this group tend to make decisions as a group? Anybody want to take a shot at how?
Well, my first guess is that most are at least between C and S, so around C, which we tend to go into the details, at least.
Right, yeah. So you all tend to come from a scientific kind of background, and so now from the standpoint of, here's Kelsey out here being quite different from the rest of the group. And so what advice would we be giving everybody in the group, and would we be giving Kelsey?
I think mine would be patience for detail. Yeah. Although I consider myself to be quite detail oriented. They're all up in my head and I don't always feel the need to discuss them verbally,
Right.
which is maybe more in contrast to the majority of the group. So that's something that I'm already conscious of and need to think of.
Yeah, the danger of having people in a group is something called groupthink, which is you can all be so accustomed to working in one way that you may miss the a creative opportunity or that sort of thing. The advantage, of course, it's easy to communicate with people who are all in the same category. What about the people who are in the center? What kind of profile do they have? And go ahead, Kevin.
They might be very balanced, right? So that all of their values look roughly the same.
Yeah, that's right. So they would tend to have a profile that's very similar across all four, which is good news and bad news. There's a particular case of that where you have both high and D is high and C is high. So let's say 80% D and 80% C. What kind of a decision maker is that? It's what I call an oscillator. It's like, I need to make this decision, but I need more detail. So sometimes those people tend to flip back and forth, and it may seem, and to other people may in fact seem very strange in their decision-making processes. It's a rare case, but we see that once in a while. So in working with organizations outside, for instance, if you're hiring people, should you continue to hire people in this quadrant or hire more people up here? The answer is, I don't know. You hire people for a particular characteristic of what they need. And if this is a senior leadership group, like the top executives in a corporation, for instance, we might say you need more diversity so you can get more people up here, but not necessarily. But when we look at this, it does give us some idea how the organization tends to work. And so, but still, if you look at this person compared to this person, that's still quite a difference in approach to things. This is more focused on stability, and this is more focused on the D and C category. So these people relatively high in D and C, but not extreme so. So that we use these charts particularly when we have group sessions, and it's sometimes helpful. So let me spend and we've got 5 minutes. Just want to say that sounds like a complicated form, but let's talk about how you might develop your own personal plan. And so the question to be answered is, where do I want to go in my career? And where does the company want me to go? And hopefully those two are the same set. That's the best situation. So if you look at your page 15 through 22 and you say, here's something I'd like to work on, I can set a goal for that. So improve my listening capability. Let's say that for this particular profile we looked at. If I do that, what are my rewards? My rewards are people respond to me better. I'll understand more about what we're trying, how we work together, and so forth. What are the consequences if I don't? I may lose effectiveness. So what's the target date? I want to be able to measure that. And what is the day's date? So this is essentially what we call a SMART goal. It's specific, it's measurable, it can be attained, it's realistically high, and it's time related. So now I say, where am I and what are the possible obstacles to getting to my goal? And you can write these things down as, you know, I need more I need to figure out a training program for myself, or I need my boss to understand what I'm trying to do, and so forth. And usually we've got 2 pages to this sheet. You fill in all the obstacles, and you go back and say, look at this obstacle, and say, here's some solutions I could consider to overcome that obstacle. And you do that for each one of these. And obviously you've now broken the issue down into components. And then I go back and I consider these alternatives, and I pick the one I think is best, and here are the steps to put it in place. And if you do that in detail, then at the end, then you can put dates by those and who's going to get it done, put them into your smartphone, and you've got a plan.
Sorry, sir.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. Ilse has a meeting at 4.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to have 5 extra minutes after 4 to continue discussing with the rest of the team, but she has to leave on time.
All right.
She has a customer call. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. So let's just quickly ask if there are any questions. And I'd like to emphasize, if you would like to talk individually, send me an email. We can set up a time. So any questions to sort of wrap this up?
Not for now.
Okay. So this.
Will we get a copy of that wheel where we can see where everyone fits, so we can keep it actively in mind when we have team?
Yeah, sure. I will send you. I can send you a PDF of the whole presentation if you like, and then that is included in there. And also, I can send you copies of this goal planning sheet that might be helpful.
Thank you.
So so any questions that might come up, feel free to send me an email, and happy to help any way I can. Okay, so it's I've got 1 minute to 4. Well, thank you all very much for this session, and it's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm cheering for your success.
Thank you, Grant.
Take care.
Thank you so much for your time and your insight.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Grant.
Okay, thanks.